Dr. Seuss seemed to get the idea that small or seemingly insignificant things had a voice, and that sometimes it took someone else's voice to speak for them. In Horton Hears a Who, an elephant spoke for the tiny inhabitants on a speck of dust. And we all know how the Lorax spoke for the trees. So, being a beekeeper in charge of thousands of tiny creatures, all of which I think we can agree are extremely important for our existence, it occurred to me that I could speak for them. And then I was reminded of the Lorax's amazing speech, and that inspired me. And because bees rhymes with trees, it was pretty easy to use his model. So here it goes. I am a beekeeper. I speak for the bees. I speak for the bees, for the bees have no tongues. They have a proboscis. And I'm also in charge of the flowers and fruit that feed the whole world. That you cannot dispute. For bees are essential in making that fruit. Now, thanks to the poison you spray on the ground, the bees may be dying, and that is profound. I am a beekeeper. I speak for the bees. So what are the bees saying? Well, to the gardeners and farmers, they're saying, let more things flower, but don't spray them, for that's the food that we bring back to our homes. And just to be clear, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says that U.S. homeowners use up to 10 times more chemical pesticides per acre on our lawns than farmers do on their crops. To homeowners who find bees living in their ceilings and walls, they're saying, please don't exterminate us, but call a beekeeper to give us a new home. And finally, to the beekeepers, they say, take care of us, but don't exploit us to our detriment. Commercial beekeepers with huge pollinating operations are necessary for many of the crops that we consume. But they do put our nation's honeybees at risk as they transport them around the country and expose them to pests and diseases that they're not used to. So as a backyard beekeeper, not an expert one at all, but a passionate one, I would like to talk to you about how you can make a huge difference in the bee population simply by keeping bees in your backyard. Now, imagine being able to be intimately involved with caring for a colony of 50,000 bees. I know that sounds daunting, but people really have been doing it for thousands of years, and it's not rocket science, believe me. I started keeping bees because I wanted the honey that they produce, but it's become so much more meaningful to me. The experience of observing and managing bees has drawn me deeply into this important cause for which all our lives depend. I started looking at the world differently. I started to listen to the bees. I noticed how the seasons affected them, which flowers were blooming that they liked, and I also saw the exterminator signs on the sides of cars, and government workers and landscapers spraying entire swaths of land with herbicides, and shearing bushes just as they're beginning to flower. It almost hurts to be aware, but isn't it pain that allows us to speak for those who are really suffering, who have no voice? Now, I don't want anyone to be misled into thinking that I don't understand that there's a real fear of bees, especially here in Arizona, where more than 95% of our wild colonies are Africanized. So I'm going to tell you a story that, as a beekeeper, I don't usually tell, and you'll see why. So in 2006, I moved to Arizona from Seattle, and I had a 18-month-old and a 4-year-old, And one of the things we were most excited about was having a huge lemon tree in our backyard. I dreamed of using every single lemon on that tree, which I know is completely ridiculous. It was a huge tree. But being new to Arizona, having a lemon tree was just as novel as having a swimming pool. So I decided I was going to juice all the lemons and make lemon peel candy like my grandmother used to do. So on this particular day, I spent all morning juicing, peeling, and cooking all those peels in big batches of sugar syrup. The house smelled like lemon heaven, if you can imagine. When the peels were all done cooking, I tossed them in sugar. This is a recipe. Tossed them in sugar and put them out on the patio to cool and dry. Well, what I know now, but I did not know then, is that besides honey, two of the biggest attractants for honeybees is sugar and lemon. So, as I went about my day, failing to look outside for several hours, I finally did look outside. And what I saw absolutely terrified me. There on my patio was a swarm of bees covering everything, all the candy I'd made, everything on my patio. And being new to Arizona, the three things I feared most were scorpions, rattlesnakes, and killer bees. Killer bees. Now, I thought that what was going to happen is that they were going to eat the candy, and then they were going to come after us, which is, I know, ridiculous. And also, I've been a vegetarian my whole life because I never, ever wanted to hurt another living thing. But at that moment, I did not care. Here's where it gets bad. I sent my husband out the front door to get a can of Raid. And so when he came back, we sprayed the entire patio and all the candy that I'd spent all day making with Raid. And then in a matter of minutes, there were thousands and thousands of dead bees laying in a pool of sugar syrup and Raid. I felt so terrible when I looked at that. Why did I think those bees were going to kill us? Well, I'll tell you why. It was because of the false propagation that Africanized bees are out to kill us, since they came here in the early 90s. Now I know better. Africanized bees are not out to get us. And for all I know, those bees could have been from a neighbor's backyard hive. You would never know the difference. And I think about that sometimes, wondering what my bees are out being exposed to. Now, I'm not proud of that story, but I tell it because I want backyard beekeepers to know that we can help change that mindset. And we also have the ability and responsibility to alter the genetic makeup of the bees in our neighborhoods by relocating and requeening wild colonies. And that's something I absolutely love talking about. So if anyone has questions, I'd love to talk to you about that. And by managing our hives in our own backyards, we can help our neighbors understand that bees are something we can live with and not fear. And finally, backyard beekeepers can be advocates for not only the bees that we care for, but the more than 20,000 species of bees in the world, only 7 of which are honeybees. And did you know that the word advocate literally means to call to aid or to add a voice? Therefore, I am a beekeeper. I speak for the bees. Will you listen? Thank you.